Hey everyone, welcome to the Field Instructor Orientation. Thank you so much for taking the time and the patience to just kind of relax, get your popcorn, your best snuggle blanket, and just join me for a while here tonight, or this afternoon, or the morning, depending on when you're taking a look at this. So I'm officially Dr. Ruth Garrettson McCain, the director of the MSW Field Education at Regis College. Please never call me that. Hey, it's just Ruth, okay? That's what it is. The students have to, but that's an institutional policy, so I just go, okay, fine. Anyway, this is just such an exciting time for me to have this opportunity to visit with you. And first and foremost, thank you so much for your willingness to support the future of our profession. It just, it means everything. And I think about our code of ethics when it talks about giving back to our profession. What better way is there to give back than to secure the future of our profession? So thank you so much. My so-called expertise is global social work. Most of my research has been done globally, so I've been very, very blessed in that component. In fact, when I was doing my dissertation for my PhD, it was building a field program and curriculum for a university in Kumasi, Ghana, which it was just such an incredible experience and opportunity. I live in Utah, in the Salt Lake City Valley, in one of the suburbs there. And so I'm in the Mountain Standard Time. But you know what? If we need to meet or something, I don't care what time it is, I will work with your time zone. So please don't worry about that. Okay, I'm going to show a PowerPoint. So let me just get this up and going and then I will share it with you. Just take a second here. All right, no. Okay, close, very close. Just the infamous share button, right? Okay, hopefully you can see this. So, ah, all right, let's just leave it as it is. I was going to do something else with it, but it's acting a little funky. And you've got more important things than to sit through me with this. So again, welcome to Regis as a member of the Regis Field family. Thank you so much. Now, Regis is an officially fully online accredited social work program through Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts. I was at the University of Utah for 20 plus years doing exactly what I'm doing now at Regis, except I can do it from anywhere on the planet, which really makes life much better for me given the different things that I'm involved with. But we admit students 3 times a year, and that impacts field in the sense that, so I'm sending students out for fall spring placement, for spring summer placement, for summer fall placement. So you'll often be hearing from students looking for a practicum and or from me saying, hey, got any room at the end to be able to welcome in another intern? And we follow the standards as determined by the Council on Social Work Education. Now, that's who accredits every program, a social work program in the United States. And it's interesting to me that when it talks about a field instructor or a graduate having graduated from accredited school, I'm thinking, why would you not? Because you wouldn't be able to take the exams for licensure, etc., if you did not graduate from a institution that was accredited. So we, thank goodness, are now on the 8-year plan. We've come through 2 accreditations and now we're bumped up to we don't have to do it again for 8 years, which is really nice for Dr. Considine, the program director, because it's like writing a dissertation every time she has to do that. So I'm happy for her to have a bit of a break now for a few more years. So the Council on Social Work Education speaks to competencies. And in 2015, there were competencies that we were to follow. which we did. There is now a new set of competencies. It's actually only impacting 2 of the 9 that you see here that I'll talk about in just a moment, that are called the 2022. So for students going out in the fall, this particular year, and this is being recorded in the summer of 2025. And so this might not pertain for those of you watching it in a year or two, right? But I just like to throw this out here, that we were obligated to do these core competencies, and the specialized students will use these same competencies for fall and spring of 2025 and 26. But the students starting 2026 across generalist and specialized will be using the 2022 competencies. And those will be in place until the Council on Social Work Education, or CSWE, changes those. And that happens every now and then. So you can see there's 9 areas here that you're going to be aiding your intern progress through. And there's a way that we'll do that with learning contracts, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So the 2022 competencies, the big difference are competency 2 and 3, where this speaks specifically to advancing human rights and social, economic, and environmental justice, and engaging anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion in practice. These came about for multiple reasons, which you could probably imagine and come up with your own scenario as to the whys when we think of our profession, when we think of our code of ethics. And so again, the foundational students will be using these for fall and spring. Okay, so let's move on. So field placements, when we think about field placements, it is that brilliant opportunity to practice real life experiences. The Council on Social Work Education refers to field as the signature pedagogy. And it is this awesome opportunity and a required opportunity. Our students do not get a master's degree without you and your guidance through these practicums. So the people that are involved is, of course, myself as a field director, but also I teach a couple of the specialized seminars. So in that case, I'm wearing a field faculty liaison hat as well. The MSW field instructor with with at least 2 years of experience. Licensure can vary depending on whether it's a macro practice or a micro meso. Additionally, in the first year, a student doesn't necessarily have to have an MSW student in the foundation year, the generalist year, as long as their field instructor is someone with a graduate degree in a like field, like psychology or sociology or criminology or education. But what is required in that situation is that the student be given the opportunity to ensure that they have a perspective that's given to them. It's nice if you have a social worker on staff that could provide a monthly get together with these students and offer that perspective. Otherwise, I have someone in place who meets with the students once a month from outside of Regis, who's a clinical social worker, and takes care of that perspective for us. And that's something the students would do in addition to what they're doing with you and within the organization. It's also, if there's a need for a task supervisor, because I know how busy everyone is, and our task supervisors within your organization are amazing, right? They oversee the day-to-day, and they assist you in the student in creating a learning contract, and they assist you and the student in evaluations and things of that nature. So if you need to include a task supervisor, please do so. They don't necessarily have to be a social worker, because again, the onus is on you to provide that supervision weekly and to ensure that the competencies are being accomplished. Now, when we think about the generalist, for example, That's a minimum number of 480 hours, or approximately 15 hours a week over 2 consecutive semesters. Now, I have had the occasional student say, well, I guess I'm done with field. I hit my 480. No, you're not. You have 2 semesters that this needs to be taken care of. And so I have put down minimum purposely to kind of address that situation. They don't earn hours for holidays or time off or sick days. And the experience about it being face to face, as we know, can look a multiple different ways now, right? So we just think about that. What is about being face to face? What can that look like? What does that look like within your organization? Students arrange their schedules with you, their field instructor. And again, as mentioned, face to face can look very different and can include certainly, but not limited to telehealth. In fact, when we were hit with COVID, I started with Regis on July 1st of 2019. COVID came the following year. And honestly, our students were prepared to jump in, especially when it came to telehealth, because this is the type of the online education that they are receiving. I know some places have the thoughts of, oh, online, just a degree mill. Absolutely not. Having been a student, having taught in a brick and mortar school, having engaged now in online education, it is incredibly rigorous. And these students have to be self-starters. They have to be engaged. They have to own their education, which sometimes that can just look a little differently in a different format. The specialized students have to do a minimum of 600 hours. And so that's about 20 hours per week, again, with those same issues around what does not count as time. And again, the same minimum hour explanation and the situation of face to face. As you think about those components in your organization and what makes the most sense for what you all are doing. Of course, it's important that our students learn and have a feedback loop. So when we think about this, one of the best things that will happen is early in the first semester, you will have a site visit, which will be you, your student, and your field liaison, the person teaching their seminar class. If you have a task supervisor, they would join in on that as well, because again, they bring a level of care and professionalism that's so important. And if you do have a task supervisor, they would fill out that same application, the field instructor slash task supervisor application, and submit it to me with their resume. Now, you are going to help the student create their learning contract, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I will say this, the learning contract, once it is written, is good for both semesters. It's visited again in the second semester, basically to see if you want to leave it the same, if there's anything you want to delete, anything you want to add. There should be a weekly supervision clinical hour. If you do a group supervision of sorts, then I would expect at least a minimum of a half-hour supervision with that clinical supervision with your student. You are going to receive a midpoint evaluation that's due in week 16 of the first semester. And I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. It keeps being improved. It's part of SWEEP, and that'll be more clear in just a few moments. Towards the end of the second semester, you'll have your final site visit. The Council on Social Work Education requires a minimum of 2 site visits. So I figured the introductory one and then the final one. That's 2, right? So we count it. Of course, if you ever need to meet more frequently, that can happen. And I do offer drop-ins, which will be a part of the email that you got regarding this for this go around. The dates that basically it's, hey, if you want to drop in and talk about anything going on, feel free to do so. I've had so much fun with field instructors that have taken advantage of that time. And I was going to say, I'll bring my water up. We share some water, or Celsius in my case, and just have some great conversations. And then there will be a final evaluation using the very same format that you used for the midpoint evaluation. and that will be due the week 16 of that second semester. So when students begin, I ask that you remember what it was like for you. I often tell students, now once you've graduated, once you're out there and you're doing all this stuff, one of the best ways to start a conversation with a social worker is, so tell me about your field experience. My first experience was a little concerning, and it only became concerning like the last 3 weeks of the practicum when I was like, oh my gosh, am I even going to pass? It's a long story. If you ever want to share it, drop into one of those sessions and we'll talk about it. But and then, of course, the second one was fantastic. So it's just remembering what that was like, remembering what it felt like to be in that situation, especially our traditional students don't have necessarily a background in social work, but they have lots of life experience and such. But there's still that sense of, am I going to be able to do it? Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And so just remembering that they're going to express these feelings in all kinds of ways. If you've got the opportunity that you can assign a mentor, that's great. Have them shadow some workers, again, wonderful. I would be a little cautious as to how long you would do that though, because in some ways it can be disabling to a student too. Um, the longer that goes on, I think it heightens the anxiety about, oh no, now I'm going to have my own clients, versus it gets to the point where you have to throw them into the fire, right? So it's okay. It's okay. We've been there. And I think it's really nice if they can tour the agency. I often tell the students, you know, it's not the president that is knows what's going on in the organization necessarily. They have wisdom and knowledge about all kinds of things, but if you want to know the day to day, become colleagues with the receptionist. They've got it all figured out, right? Um, Also, having opportunity for your intern to be able to delve into your manuals, especially around agency specific policies. You will receive with this video in the email an orientation handout. There's going to be a few handouts that will be available to you. So they'll be a part of that. Again, it's if you can help the students really understand their task, your expectations around paperwork, the readings, videos, and trainings if possible. And if there's something you want them, maybe there's a video or something you want them to do off-site, if you give them permission to count that time to do it and they're accountable to you in some way that they've done it, let them count that time towards their hours, okay? There's going to be oftentimes a situation around, so what is the expectation of dress? Because things can look very different. I would suggest that if a student is in a practice organization, their level of expectation around dress could look very different than if they are at a women's shelter, something of those things. It's just keeping in mind those we are reaching out to and those that we're trying to have an impact in, and how some things, even around dress, can be put folks at arm's length, right? Also, how do you want them to use their time? How do you feel about cell phones? What are their hours going to be? And I do hope that if your organization has expectations around calls and all of this other stuff, I get nervous when the students are using their own cell phones for such things, for a number of reasons. One, our concern for their safety and confidentiality about their personal information, right? That if they're having to use their cell phone that has their phone number on it and things of that nature. But I know I'm preaching to the choir right now. I think it's really important that they understand your policies around social media. When I do the orientation for interns, I really, really do a deep dive on social media and do's and don'ts, and just not to use it, to be very, very careful, make sure their own social media is locked down, that they protect themselves, but also that they are protective of your organization, that they are not taking photos, videos, anything that would jeopardize that. And it's really important that your policies speak to that. Now, this can be a fun assignment for students too. If you don't have any policies around that, maybe on the learning contract, maybe one of the assignments you have them do is generate a policy around certain things, say social media or dress policy, whatever. And it's important that the intern know what to do if you're unavailable. So if all of a sudden you have to be out, then what do they do? Who do they contact? And of course, what you expect as far as telephone etiquette. So again, some cool assignments that the students can do is develop a placement manual for future students and employees, right? I had some students do the coolest thing one time years ago. What they did at the practicum they were at is they started like a journal for students. And as new students would come in, they would add to this journal about things they wish they had known or how great it was that they learned this and just how engaging it was. And just, it's just kind of that nice piece for students to be able to have a heritage, if you will, and be able to add to it and be meaningful as well. Helping you plan for annual events, developing curriculum for staff trainings, and or let's say you need a new group. Have an intern create curriculum for you, and maybe they can help co-facilitate that group or facilitate it themselves. We have a lot of students, I mean, so many students these days have great design abilities. So again, finding out what they do well, and then incorporating that into some of their assignments. And engage them in community opportunities and trainings if at all possible. Again, there will be a handout specific to learning activities and handouts. All right. Tasks for field instructors. Oh, assisting the student to develop a learning contract. Again, we're going to talk more about that. To provide that clinical supervision. There are two ways the student keeps track of time. One is on core. You should get an email from core, hopefully no later than the first week of school, where you can sign in and review your students' hours and sign off on them. Sometimes it can be a little tricky. So another thing the students do is they keep an Excel spreadsheet that you can review and sign off on as well. Read and evaluate the students' process recordings. We do not have a lot of process recordings, and CSWE was just fine with that. In the foundation year, they have 2 in the first semester and 1 in the second semester. In the specialized, they have 1 in the first semester and they don't have any more. Now, some schools have, or some organizations have said like, what are you doing? That's crazy. And I tell the interns, and I bring this up when I do site visits, and I share this with you now, you can have them do as many as you like. I only, or the other field liaisons only have to see so many. I hope that makes sense. What concerns me is several years ago, I had an organization that expected a process recording on every client through the whole 2 semesters. I struggle to understand the value in that. It makes sense if, you know, and in this particular situation, it wasn't even the field instructor. It was someone above them that was saying, no, you've got to do this. It, it, it can be completely challenging. It can impact the number of clients that an intern can have. Additionally, it adds such an extra burden to your plate. So again, be, you know, as you're thoughtful about what that looks like for your organization, because I will always back you in those things unless it's for every client, for every, you know, for in perpetuity. That I just see as problematic, and we can have some conversations around that as well. If there's ever an issue or concern, again, remember CSW requires 2 visits, if you will. But please, please, please don't hesitate. If there's an issue or a concern, then get together with the assigned field liaison for your intern, the person teaching the seminar class, and have some conversations. And if we need to do more, we can do that. Complete the evaluations in a timely fashion. Those I generate them for every intern, and I try to get them out to you 3 week. Well, I don't send it to you. It actually comes from Sweep, which will make more sense in a minute. But I try to get them out 2 to 3 weeks early so that you've got plenty of time for you, the student, if you have a task supervisor, to sit down in a supervision and mark the evaluations. And again, that'll make more sense in just a minute. And please, 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 if there's feedback, um, I'm excited to hear that. So some reminders that your students slash interns, they are not workers, they are not volunteers, and to please be mindful of that. Sometimes that can look a little gray, and this especially can look a little gray if an intern is using their job as their practicum. It is going to look different in that situation, right? Because yeah, they're working, but at least part of their hours are counting towards their internships. Um, so there's kind of that leeway in that one, but it's just important that your clients know, that others within your organization know that they are interns. That, and I tell them, termination starts at the beginning. Just by your introduction that you're an intern suggests that there will be an end to that. Be direct and honest in your communication, of course, using our code of ethics, and especially around strengths-based and unconditional positive regard, that we strive our best to really demonstrate that to our interns. Be open about sharing your own field experiences. That helps develop rapport with your intern, and also showing that nothing's perfect, right? And schedule ample time to be available, or at least have someone who can be available if you are not there, should, heaven forbid, a crisis occur. So the learning contract. Okay, the learning contract. This is basically what it looks like. This is an example of the generalist. There's actually more for them to do in the generalist than there is in the specialized. But it makes sense, right? So you're simply going to come up with some tasks and learning activities together that uh, respond to each one of these behaviors. So what make ethical decisions by applying the standards of National Association of Social Work Code of Ethics, da 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 da. So maybe, you're going to have them, they should have access to the NASW Code of Ethics, and they're going to pick apart each one of these. Then you're going to have them maybe read portions of it and talk about it in supervision, or maybe write you a paragraph about it. So that could be one task or learning activity. And of course, there's many more. Using technology ethically and appropriately to facilitate practice and outcomes. So, okay, what does that look like for you? What could the intern do to ensure that that's happening? When it comes to methods of evaluation, sometimes those can be a little tricky. If the field liaisons ever return their learning contracts for a deeper dive, it's typically because the student or the intern has put things under methods of evaluation that are actually tasks and learning activities, right? So I recommend, if you're feel good with it and you're comfortable with it, I recommend just the 4 following. Supervision, so important. Feedback they're getting from colleagues and clients that they can talk with you about in supervision. Midpoint evaluations and final evaluations. And if you're comfortable with those, hey, the intern can copy and paste those all the way down the document. And again, remember, this is just showing the first competency. For the specialized, this, again, the first behavior here, it's going to look very, very similar to this, keeping in mind that it's under construction, but this is what essentially yours is going to look like for this semester, for those in 25 and early 26. The rest of you in future times, some time travel here, you'll have the new updated learning contract. But again, it will be very simple. And the same recommendations. Now it has approximate date here. I apologize for that. I should have taken that off. Because again, the contract is for the full 2 semesters. So please, please, please do not feel like you have to put down an approximate date, because who knows, right? Now, as I indicated, the learning contracts are under construction for starting spring 2026 for first semester interns. Now the evaluation, I talked about sweep, and I'm going to show you a little piece of that. But of course, when we think about why evaluations, well, gatekeeping, right? I've had so many interesting conversations around gatekeeping at national conferences where I've thought, what do you mean? Gatekeeping comes up and it raises all kinds of exciting conversations. Some who are very much for it, some who are not so much. I tend to be for it, but the academic credit graded course, a time to stop and take stock, right? So what you think about when you do those evaluations, it's planning for an evaluation conference, or essentially it's one of your supervisions, right? Towards the end of that semester where you are making sure that evaluation is done. And these evaluations are so simple, you really should, unless something comes up in them, be able to do it in one sit down. And it's important to write any comments on the evaluation tool that are necessary. So here's the deal. So this is showing what SWEEP, the Social Work Education Assessment Project, kind of what this looks like. They do look a little different, but at the end of the day, it's very, very, very similar. So the mid-practicum evaluation happens in that first semester course. And again, I try to get them out to you early so that, and again, not me, I generate them. SWEEP sends them out to you. So I will let the interns know your evaluations have been sent out. Please check with your field instructor to make sure they have received it. It often ends up in junk mail or spam mail. If you ever have a problem receiving it, you just need to let me know and I will come up with another way to make sure you have it. But I do get those out early so that you can have those done at the very latest in week 16. I ask in the final comments, if you feel strongly, you don't have to do this, but that you would initially like assign a grade. Now, here's the thing about grading. Ultimately, they have all of these assignments they're doing in the seminar course as well that feed into that grading, so it can look different. And you're going to have a rubric. And of course, all the students are going to want fives. They all want fives, right? But as I tell them in the site visit, if I were doing a site visit with you, that the first evaluation, if you're getting all threes, you're doing great. That says, you're doing this, you've got it, you're acting competently as an intern, not as a seasoned professional like yourself. Okay. But where we run into problems is if I see twos and ones. That's grounds for dismissal. That's grounds that whether I'm your field liaison or not, you would be hearing from your field liaison saying, hey, we need to meet with that student and see if there's any way to salvage this. Now, where we found there was an issue was if the student just hadn't been able to do it yet. And so the field instructor hit like a 1 or 2, but in the comments, they would say, student's doing great. They just haven't been able to work on this yet. So that was a big red flag, right? Because that skews the data. And CSWE can ask for these reports anytime they feel like it. So you'll notice, those of you with foundation students, at least this go around, there's going to be a not observed in that midpoint evaluation. And you would just write in comments, we haven't done it yet, but it's going to happen by the end of the full practicum. And you would do the same if that not observed is not on there. It will be soon, but right now for the specialized clinical, it will not be till spring. And that won't affect you because your students will be in their second semester. But just be mindful. I remember I had a student once, I got an evaluation tool. It was all ones.
I was having a coronary. I contacted the field instructor and said, "We need to get that student in here now because I'm going to take them." And she's like, "What are you talking about? They're doing great." And I go, "Let me show you the evaluation tool." So I brought it up and I shared my screen. She goes, "Oh, no, I know what happened." And I said, "What?" She goes, "I sent them the link so they could take a look at it. And I guess they thought they were to grade it because they graded it and finalized it." So needless to say, I did have a conversation with the student that he would never touch a live document again. And now and then he graduated a few years ago. Now and then I get an email from him and he'll say, "Hey, Ruth," because he doesn't have to call me doctor anymore. Um, "just want you to know I'm still not touching any live instruments." So I appreciate that. But again, that midpoint evaluation tool, I expect to see a lot of threes. I've seen fours and fives, and that's fine. If I see a ton of them, I'm wondering, what does that intern have on you that you're giving them such a high grade, right? But certainly in that final evaluation, I would expect to see much higher, like fours, a lot more fours and fives, right? So I hope that makes sense, and it will make so much sense to you after you've done that first one. You're going to go, "Ah, these are so easy, no big deal." Um, there can be a with social work, and sometimes we get this attitude of, "Oh, they should have an A," but not everyone's an A student. But I'll tell you, they're pretty darn good students. But we just want to make sure you're not being used and abused by students hustling for a grade, or that, when we think about grade inflation, we want the students to be graded fairly, of course, of course. And again, hopefully you're not hearing from us on any ones and twos. But if that's what they deserve, that's what they get, and we'll have a deeper conversation with you and that student. Um, so just helping the student, keep perspective, especially in that midpoint evaluation where maybe they're all threes and they're like, "Oh no, it's fine. It's beautiful. They're doing great." So just bearing in mind that we are gatekeepers, in my opinion. But again, we come from a strengths based on that. We come from unconditional positive regard as well, and remembering what it was like for us. So it's really important that the students are mindful of safety. They have assignments in the foundation practicum and in the specialized practicum about what are their organization's safety plans. So hopefully your policies and procedures have safety plans. If for some reason they don't, throw it at your intern and say, "What do you think, you know, a good safety plan would be?" Because they're coming with, again, that those fresh eyes as they're looking at things, right? They have to sign a acknowledgement of risk statement that I came up with during COVID, that now the institution, the university uses as a whole, where basically they're saying, right, I accept the fact that I might be facing a communicable disease. I might be facing civil unrest, natural disasters. I wonder where that all came from, right? These are all things that we have faced, especially in the last few years. So again, they sign a document relevant to that, but it is important that they know what your agency policies are. And then what type of trainings do you have for those? And again, maybe that's an assignment you give your intern to create and put that into the learning contract, and one of those behaviors that speaks to that, again, considering the 9 competencies, right? Okay. Dealing with problems. So the minor problems are, again, think back to what it was like for you. Oh my gosh, you thought it was going to be saving lives, right? Well, I'm a big believer that our clients know what they need. And although we may not always agree with that, our code of ethics speaks very clearly to self-determination. And that savior complex can come in there, and what? That's a toughie. That's something that can smack us really fast. And so as we understand that, if I were your field liaison when it comes to countertransference, for example, I bring up an example of countertransference that I dealt with 21 years ago, where it was a major fail. It was a major fail on my part. But it's been my greatest teacher for me throughout my career since. We do not tolerate any bad mouthing of the school or your agency. That is not acceptable. That is not professional. So if you need me, I tell the interns, I've got your back. I have your back. But don't think for 1 minute I don't have your field instructor's back, because I do. If there's a major problem, we all come together, right? And using our code of ethics, we typically are able to work through them. Um, Sometimes there can be a lack of accountability. Okay, so we deal with that. Now and then the intern wants to change their practicum. Well, that's the easy way out. Let's see what's going on. And it could just be that sense of I'm so afraid I don't know what I'm doing. But that's pretty normal feeling. And then of course that's keeping in mind of the different learning styles. When problems occur, please document, document, document. You know how it goes. If it's not written, it didn't happen. And if you're discussing the problem with the student, make sure it's documented after each discussion. Consider writing a contract, and please, please, please inform the field liaison, the person who your intern has as their teacher, their professor in their seminar class. And they should let me know, or please, if you are writing to them, CC me as well. That would be very, very helpful. And of course, we're not out there to scare our interns and make them worried every 5 minutes that they're going to fail. We want to be able to help them succeed. And even in some cases, it's when we would get together to talk about, is there any way to salvage this? And what would that look like? And as we work together as a team on that. The more serious problems which could occur would be dealt with very, very differently. And I would please ask that if this were to ever happen, that not only would you let the field liaison know, you would let me know, and we could have a meeting to discuss how to move forward around these very, very serious concerns. I'll just pause for a second here. Gatekeeping. I love this question. It was one even a billion years ago. We were being asked, would you be willing for this student to provide services to someone I care about? Well, maybe yes, maybe no, and maybe it's just who the person you care about needs. I don't know. But that's kind of in the back of our minds, right, as we think about how that comes down the pike. Whew, here we are. If there are any questions, thoughts, recommendations, etc., please, please, please do not hesitate to email me. You should have the email because it was on this link that you received, along with those handouts and everything else. And my contact information again, though, and the program director, Dr. Donette Considine. So, once more, and I mean this with my whole heart, thank you so much for being a part of the Regis Practicum family. Thank you for securing the future of our profession. Thank you for the time and energy that you give to this. I tell our interns, you know how much your field instructor is being paid, right? They go, I go, this, a big fat zero. And I'm going to give them all 100% increase. I just want them to really, truly understand the sacrifice that you were all making to aid them in their endeavors. Because again, they don't get a master's degree without you. They've got to get through this, right? So again, thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing this and just please, please, please let me know if there's anything I can do. Let me know if there's some way I can be supportive of you and what that could look like for us. You'll have those drop-in dates on the link for this. It'll be in the email along with those handouts. And just please, please take care of yourself. It's, you know, I know it goes like this, but as I tell the interns, we don't have a choice in self-care. We got to figure it out. Otherwise, there's too many things that could occur that could have a harmful effect on your clients, but also you want to be able to teach your clients about self-care. and the many, many ways that that can look. So take care of you and please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again so much. Bye.